So next up, we have Markus Mueller, who's CTO of Apidaida, Apidaida, or API data. I don't know how you pronounce this.
It's Apiida.
Apiida.
Apiida,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Thank you. So you're going to be talking about taming the beast, how to manage multiple API platforms at once. This is like a big thing right now, right, in the sector. People are very much looking for ways to not to have to pick one platform, but be able to run multiple at the same time. So I'm very curious to hear more about your talk, and and let's catch up after the presentation with questions.
All right, let's do that. Okay, yeah. Hello, everyone. So as I was just introduced, the talk I'm doing is about managing multiple API platforms. We actually see this in the market happening right now for a multitude of reasons that we will get into within the call. First, short introduction. My name is Markus. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Apiida. And we at Apiida, we always love to talk to people that are in the API industry, that are consuming APIs, that are publishing APIs. So we're always open for just some conversations about APIs and API management. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you can do that via Twitter, via LinkedIn, or via email, whatever suits you. The company Apiida, who are we? We're probably not that well known, besides being at API Days already. I think we also did Paris one year. We see ourselves as the experts for API engineering and for integration. We serve more than 140 customers located mostly in Europe, but some stateside, some in the Middle East. And we're a Broadcom Tier 1 and Expert Advantage partner. So it doesn't get any better than that. So if you're running a layer 7 infrastructure, make sure to drop by at our booth. But we also represent a lot of other vendors in the meantime. So without further ado, let's get started with the talk and why we're all here. The topic of this API Days is the future of software. And being an API conference, well, the answer is quite obvious. What is the future of software? The future of software is APIs. But let's have a closer look at what are the current trends in the market. A lot of companies are adopting API first, and everything is turned into an API. So what we're currently seeing is that even in the companies that already have an API program, the sheer number of APIs increases, and it won't stop in the years to come. And until a few years ago, it mainly was about SOAP and REST when we talked about web-based APIs. And now we have all different kinds of technologies. We have GraphQL, we have gRPC, we have different flavors of asynchronous APIs. And this is a trend where we think that we will continue on that trend. You will have very specific types for different industries, for example, as you can see with MQTT in the IoT space, and that trend will continue. And one thing we also see with our customers is that more and more teams are being empowered. And that means that they get autonomy. They can decide on their tech stack themselves. They're not bound to a company tech stack and you have to fit in there, make it somehow work. If your product, if the product that that team is developing requires other tech, you're free to pursue this. And this ultimately leads to one situation, and that is that you will have multiple API platforms deployed in your company. And there's a report of Xway that are also participating here in API Days that 30% of the bigger enterprises right now are already using like 3 different API platforms, and it will just grow from there, right? So there's no turning back. And multiple API platforms also means you have an increase in complexity. And that is a theme that you hear in quite some talks here at API Days. And this complexity is the beast that we are trying to tame in this talk, right? So this is the complexity that have your API service go down for no apparent reason because somebody did a wrong configuration, because he configured it the same way another platform would be configured, and that brought your production system down. Or that is the beast that's lurking in the shadows when your developers complain to you why is it so hard to find the documentation for the version that is currently deployed in production, and so on and so on. So what we'll do is we'll visit multiple strategies, how you can cope with this complexity, and we'll evaluate these strategies, and we'll evaluate them on multiple problem dimensions. The first is the developer experience, how easy it is to consume the API, how easy it is to find the documentation. We'll also do spotlight on governance and compliance. So if you're responsible for your API program, if you're like the CIO or whatever of a company, you have to answer the question, what APIs do I have published, right? And what are the criteria that they can access? Is everything compliant with the IT security regulations? We also look at operations. So how easy is it to operate? How easy is it to keep it running, to guarantee uptimes? And last but not least, we'll look at feasibility, right? So just because you can apply a certain strategy doesn't mean that you should do it. So let's jump right in. How does our basic setup look like? Well, for this talk, we assume you have 3 different platforms running. On the left-hand side, you have the developers that are trying to register the API as their application so that they are able to consume the APIs, that want to access documentation. You have the consuming applications that just want their traffic to be sent to the right place, and you'll have operations. Now, most of the time, you are running API platforms that adhere to the full life cycle model, which means they have their own developer portals, they have their own API gateways, they have their own management consoles in some way. So this is the basic setup that we're working with here. And the first strategy is what I call the I don't care strategy. And basically that means you don't do nothing at all. You just leave it like that. You just leave it with multiple platforms. Now let's evaluate it against our problem dimensions. Developer experience is just horrible, right? So this is a developer experience and documentation track. So you all know what I'm talking about. Multiple platforms, multiple dev portals. You have to log in, hopefully with the same account. If it's a real bad design, you have 3 different accounts. Documentation is scattered all over the place, and it's just horrible. From a governance side, it's basically the same, right? So you have to access 3 different platforms to get an overview of what you have published as a company. And these platforms are configured differently, which means that you have to apply your different rules in another way. So checking this, doing an audit on your compliance is a hard thing to do. And obviously operations won't be happy as well, because they have to support like 3 different platforms that have different requirements that they have to keep running. And if you have that situation and you talk to a, let's call it traditional API management vendor, what they tell you is just replace it with my platform, right? Just go ahead, replace all of those 3 API platforms with this one API platform. And this basically solves all your problems, right? Developers are happy. There's only one place where the documentation is. There's only one place where you get your API keys. You might have to re-enroll, but that's okay. Governance and ITsec will be happy because they don't have to check in one system. And operations does only have one system to run. So everybody is happy. However, and that's the reason why I call this strategy the gun for good until it happens again, is this is the situation you started out with. In the beginning, you just had one API platform, and then you added a second, and then you added a third. So there's no guarantee that this situation stays like this, okay? And most probably it will end up with the multi-platform strategy in the time to come. So if you can't replace it, proxy it. That means that you put an API platform in front of your other platforms. You move the developer portal to that platform, so you get the same benefits for your developers. Governance, IT security is a mixed bag. you do know what you have published, but maybe you have to check at 2 different places to see if everything is configured the right way, and operations won't be happy at all. But because what you just did is essentially you replaced 3 platforms with 4 platforms, right? So you just added another one. So this is why we call it the more the merrier strategy. But what are you about to do if you can't replace it, if you can't proxy it? Well, the strategy that we think is the right one to use is divide and conquer. Just because full lifecycle platforms have become the new normal, if you will call it like that, doesn't mean it has to be so. So just split things up, do true API management. And by true API management, we at Apiida mean that you split the APIs and the gateways, or the runtimes, if you want to call it like that. So you split things up and you have one management that just manages your APIs. It manages the version that there are in the APIs, the different specs, how to run them, the security stuff and like that. So just focus on that, right? You have the developer portal there, you have management console there, and let the hard work of really doing request after request after request, let that be done by your API runtime, because that is where the runtimes are good at, right? So that was what they were built for in the first place, to really get the data through it. All of the management, that mostly came later. Or if you look at certain open source vendors, the runtime is open source, the management is the paid offering. But there's no reason why you should use that, or why you should pay for a management tool that only allows you to manage that one runtime, when you can also pay for a tool that manages all of your different runtimes. So this is what we suggest to do. Again, developer experience is as good as it gets. There's one central place where you get your documentation. There's one central place where you get your API keys. Governance might be a mixed bag, right? So seeing what is published is easy. In most cases, it should be enough to check the true API management for the information to see if it's compliant with your IT security, right? There might be some edge cases where some additional configuration is done on the runtime itself, but at least it's not 3 times the work. It's like 1.2 or what have you. And from the operations point of view, this is good as well, because, well, they still have their 3 runtimes, but at least they haven't a 4th. And if we jump back to the last slide, what you can see here is that that proxy architecture is a layered architecture, which means that the downtimes of the layers add up. So if your proxy platform goes down, this is also downtime for all of your platforms that are behind it, no matter if they are healthy or not. The moment your proxy goes down, everything goes down. So it's far harder to reach your SLA targets, and you really have to be aware of the situation that you have this layered architecture. Traffic costs aren't really a thing nowadays, so that costs, the traffic flowing from the proxy to the API platform, I think we can neglect that, but uptime is a thing. And if you use that multi-vendor strategy, what you can see here now is that there is no layer, right? So the traffic from the application is still flowing directly into the runtime. There's no layer in between that you have to take care of. And from an uptime requirement point of view, the management console isn't as important as the runtimes. So the runtimes need to be rock solid, right? If you're if you're a sports betting company and the people want to bet on the Formula Live race and they want to do live betting, then your API runtime needs to be up. It's not important if you can enroll a new application during that race, right? So that's not the most important thing on earth. But if your runtime is down, that means you're losing money. Okay, so that is basically what we are at Apiida are working at. Aren't there yet, so we are probably going live with a true API management solution in 2022. If you'd like to have early access, come to our booth, talk to us. We'll make that work. But let's just assume that you can't or don't want to implement any of these strategies, right? So you feel like you're stuck with a situation now. However, I mean, we're in a in a developer-centric track here, kind of. You have some talented developers, so is there something that you can do to improve the situation that you have at your company right now? Is there something that you can do tomorrow without implementing another layer, without having the procurement department involved and stuff like that? So is there anything that you, from a technical perspective, can do to mitigate the problem? And yes, there are some basic things that you can do, which also will help you to implement one of the strategies should you decide to do that. And what you can do right now is you can force your APIs to be developed in code or stored in code. There are some gateway systems that store their policies, their security assertions in some kind of database, right? Not accessible from the outside, not accessible as code. So you have to extract your policies, your API proxies from these systems and have them expressed as code. No matter if it's YAML, if it's JSON, even if it's XML, that's fine, right? We can work with that. And what you then do is you just take all of your APIs that you now have and put them in Git repositories. Now that might sound a bit counterintuitive as how that solves your problem. Well, by putting all that in a Git repository, you just created one single interface that allow you to access all of your APIs, no matter in what management system they live, no matter what runtime they use. You have one interface, and that's the Git interface. And now if you do a scan of your repos and just give me a list of all my repos that I have my APIs in, that is your list of all your published APIs, right? So you don't have to check multiple systems. You just have to run a quick search on your private GitLab, private GitHub, whatever you're using. One quick search gives you the answer on what is published. And with most of these API as code approaches, you can do some pattern search to find out if they comply to your ITsec regulations, if that setting is set or not. You can mostly search that in this API source code. And by using a Git, you also get the information on who changed what and when for free, right? To use Git, you have to commit your changes, you have to push them to your repository. Everything is recorded. So again, from an ITsec perspective, it doesn't get any better than that. You see down to the line what has changed. When it comes to the topic of this track, the developer experience and the documentation, well, most of these platforms put the spec in the same place as their API as code, which means that you just have to scan all of your gateways, all of your Git repositories, and then you can extract the specs, put them in one central location. So at least you have the documentation and the current one, right? So not the old one from like a month ago, but the current one in one central location, have it up to date, have it easy to access. This doesn't solve the problem that you probably have to get multiple API codes, one from each of the platforms you're running. But honestly, if you could everything just by expressing your APIs as code and pushing it to Git repository, then there wouldn't be such tooling and such products to manage those multi-vendor stuff in the market. And when it comes down to operations, well, part of operations is to get the right version of an API into the right stage at the right time. And there's no better way to do this with a CI/CD platform, right? So you can use that to streamline your deployment platform. And if you either implemented strategy 4, divide and conquer, or if you've gone that way with a little bit of scripting, we now have tamed our beast, right? So we can now, we know it's there, it won't go away, but we can work with it. We can make the best out of it. And this is, what we at Apiida think you should be doing if you run multiples. And again, I think it's inevitable that you will be running multiple platforms at a company in the future, right? So that won't go away. It won't magically appear a platform that makes it right for you in every case. you will have multiples, and you have to deal with it. So if you would like to talk on that topic, just visit us in our booth, coming out with us. We love to talk about API management, as I said in my introduction. Also, if you disagree with me, if you just think another strategy would be best, or if I have forgotten a strategy, again, come to our booth and just talk to us. And with that, thank you for your time. And get to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Markus. There was a question from the audience. Several runtimes exist in the model. What do you suggest to distribute your APIs on these runtimes? Maybe that's something they should come and pick up on the booth so that they can go in deeper discussion.
Yeah,
Friedrich, would that be okay with you? Because it sounds like a very specific request. I wanted to ask about, because you kind of touched, it's really exciting to see that even the talks that I thought were not going to be about complexity turn out to be about complexity. And you touched on my favorite topic, which is complexity, but you were approaching it from the how do you reduce complexity. So I wanted to ask a little bit, because one of the core beliefs I hold is that complexity is not necessarily bad, but that you need to deal with it right. So I think actually taming the beast is the right approach. Well, I'm not sure actually if you can tame complexity. It's more managing the beast, maybe.
Right. So it's just making sure that there aren't so many surprises, right? So one of the cornerstones, what we do at Apiida is you have to be confident that what you're trying to do is really what happens in the end.
Yeah.
We see at a lot of customers, they are almost scared to deploy to production, to make changes to production, because they are afraid things will go down because of that complexity, right? So they think, okay, we have an API running on this runtime, an API running here, oh, better not touch it. Who knows what happens? And this is exactly what you need to handle. So I'm there with you. Complexity won't go away. Complexity isn't necessarily bad because it gives you a lot of options, right? But you need to handle your day-to-day work so that you are confident, so that you don't have to be a 100% expert in every of the systems that you're running.
Yes.
And to just make things stick, right? It has to be deterministic. If you do things twice or 3 times or 4 times, they should have always the same result.
For sure on the operational side. On the differentiation side, where we're trying to create value for the business, I think like this is the talk that Mark gave earlier. I think it's important to have the ability to adapt to different contexts, and I think that's why, like I've seen, we also see customers come to us and ask, like, how can, for us, it's not the whole management thing. It's just the dev portal that they want to have multi gateway, and one of the core issues that we always see coming back is, but we don't want to have one single central team that's going to manage for everybody. We still want to have different teams doing their own thing. And there's some complexity there that I think it would be interesting. Maybe it's not a longer discussion. I probably should take up another time also. But how do you guard useful complexity and reduce destructive complexity?
I think that's an interesting point, because even when we look at companies that have only one platform, right? So let's take an easy case first, right? So one there where you just have one platform. We often see that there are operating teams explicitly for that platform, because it just the management software and the things you have to do to publish your upstream service on that gateway is just deemed to be too complex to be bearable by the upstream team. So you have that handover, right? You don't have true DevOps, and the solution here is tooling, right? Because these gateways and these platforms, they build complexity for a reason, because they have to support a array of use cases, a wide range of customers. But within one very specific company, you don't have to support all of these use cases. So you need tooling that kinds of dumps down your complex system in a way that your upstream teams can, just directly work with a gateway without always approaching the ops team. So I really think it's the complexity of the product for a wide customer base versus reducing the complexity for one very specific customer.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's pick it up another time and let's go a bit deeper.
I'd love to.
There's more. Thank you much for the talk, Markus. I will not forget Apiida from now on, and talk to you some of next time.
Thank you.